Hello, Yves.
Hi.
Hello, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. It's just the two of us?
Yeah, it may be. No, well, I asked people to confirm all Björn and Patrick confirmed. Björn Bedstead from Danish Board of Technology Foundation, Patrick Chalmers, the journalist with All Hands On.
Yeah.
And there were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 9 other people who originally signed up, and I asked for a confirmation last night. I'm guessing it might be like 5 or 6 people, something like that.
No, no problem. We had a great call. Oh, there you go.
I'm glad. And there's Patrick.
Hey, how you doing?
Welcome, Patrick. Patrick, let's see, is want to unmute him.
Yeah, got you.
Patrick,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, David. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Running a bit fast at the moment, but happily running fast.
I missed you in Brussels. Sorry.
Yeah, Yves, I'm sorry. It was such a crazy schedule, and that was the way it all happened. You heard the news, though, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I talked to David and to Benoit, so there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, happy about all that, and planning to get down to Athens for probably the 18th of May or something, and do probably five days filming through the European elections and use that as the backdrop to the the introduction to the series.
Okay.
Where did democracy come from? Where has it got to, and where do we go from here, sort of thing.
Oh, no, it's hey, Björn.
Björn, good afternoon.
Hey.
Welcome.
Okay.
Björn and Patrick, did you meet each other in Paris?
We did indeed. Yes.
Great,
Hang
great.
on.
Certainly. You are a new member.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah.
I'm just a heads up. I'm expecting a phone call, so if I'm just dropping out for a few minutes, it's not to be rude.
No problem. Thank
It's
you.
Friday afternoon, so
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
mm,
Let's see. Okay, and there is Sylvia.
Hello.
Sylvia, welcome.
hi.
Boa tarde. All right. And this is Lori. Whoa, what happened to my video? I think I saw Lori. Yes.
I was mentioning yesterday, Yves, the Ostbelgien model for a lot of local politicians here in Copenhagen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how did they react?
I mentioned other models as well, so the reaction was slightly confused, but
Okay.
but they heard about it. Yes.
Okay.
Great.
So maybe you can do the presentation.
No.
Welcome, Adam. Welcome, Lori.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
All right. And welcome, Terry Mauritius.
My computer's in a funny position, so there I am. I'm going to turn off my camera.
Funny. I suppose you could stand upside down or something. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and who is this? AG Friday. I don't know who this is. We have a new person, but I don't know who they are.
Okay.
Who is AG Friday?
So it's good morning to most of you, right?
I think it's good afternoon to more people and good morning to a few. Like Terry and Lori and myself, I think it would be good morning. All right.
Good morning, you
Yes.
guys. Okay.
Oh, and who do we have here? All right.
Are we in the right call?
And AG Friday. I don't know. I think we're in the right call. There's two people I don't know. All right.
Okay, David, you're a master of ceremony.
Yes.
Just,
All right. Go ahead.
just from my previous call on Tuesday, there is this unmute button on the left. I think Adam has used it now. Most people have used it, yeah. So the experience is it works better if you only unmute if you're really talking.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I think, okay, I'm sorry. There's some people I don't know here. Please tell me, let me do the unmute. Who are,
Yeah, Agefrel.
yeah. I don't, okay. Hello, good afternoon. Please tell me who you are.
Mute ourselves.
Oh, well. Yves, I think you could get started.
Yeah, I don't know. There's, I think, two people.
Yes.
Who mistaken.
Excuse me, the two people where the name is Aji Fraile, we don't know. Could you please introduce yourselves?
You might have to unmute them, David.
Yes, I tried. I'm clicking on unmute and it's not working.
Okay. Anyway, So, and now I don't hear anybody anymore.
Are you?
That's Tin in Agra Freile. I recognize him.
Oh, okay. There's Tin. All right. Very good.
So I think, David, on Tuesday I had two people who were present in Eupen in the call, which gave a very lively talk, because Brett and Graham kind of intervened as kind of extra commentators of the process. So I just propose that I give a very brief presentation. I think most of you have seen at least the kind of brief layout of what the Ostbelgien model looks like. And then we spend most of the talk that I answer your questions, rather than kind of going through something you probably are already familiar with. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I would suggest, I would also like to hear Tin's perspective as well, since he was involved.
Well, he wasn't in Eupen, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's true. But as a funder.
He graciously funded us.
But it would still be interesting to hear his perspective from that, about that too.
Yes. Did we spend your money well?
Yeah, that's he can say he wants his money back. You should cancel the project.
Can I mute him? Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, I'll first give you the political lead up to the design of the model, which explains a bit the peculiar case of Ostbelgien, because we had a lot of parties involved asking us. I'll then explain a bit what the discussions were within the expert group, and then briefly what the model looks like and what we're up to getting it started in September. So how did we get started on this? We had a demand from the government of Ostbelgien, which is a very small region, 80,000 inhabitants, even a bit less. Yes, it's a very small, but they have their own government and parliament. And the government asked us whether we could design some form of permanent citizen involvement through deliberation and sortation. Yes, it was no more than that. So very white sheet of paper. We had a second meeting then with the president of the parliament, who confirmed that the parliament was also supporting this. And same thing, no specific idea of how it should take shape, or so they really asked us for the expertise. We then pulled together a group of people through Democracy R&D for a meeting last summer. So David Farrell was there, Graham Smith was there, Brett was there, Luca Belgiorno was there, Claudia Schwalitz, Carsten Berg from the European Citizens Initiative. So David van Rijbroek, myself, so we had several people there. What were the main discussions? We had a 2.5 day, 3-day meeting in Eupen, the capital of the region. So the first thing we did was talk to the politicians, of course, ask them, what do you actually want to achieve with this? So if you design a process, it doesn't hurt to first check out what politicians or what the political support is and what they want to achieve with this. So you don't design a process that when you present it, they tell you like, but that's completely not what we envisioned. Or so we took some notes from what they saw as important. Then the discussion on the first day was mainly about, and I see that Terry is gone, but it was about whether you have a one-chamber model, which is a bit the Madrid model. Do you have a fixed group of citizens, a second chamber, a citizens senate, where you have, let's say, 40, 50 citizens that sit for a very long period and follow up legislative work of the parliament, sort of doubling the representative institution, or whether you have some other form. So in the first day, we actually started out with having a citizens chamber. I think almost the full day we were thinking how you could elaborate, and an important guideline for that was the paper by the Sortition Foundation for the Scottish. So Brett wrote a paper for a Scottish organization outlining how such a chamber should take form. And I remember that being a really guideline. So discussions were about whether they would control laws or rather propose, etc. And I think by the end of the day, we kind of ran into a wall. Thinking, for example, that this would impose a very strong regime on the few citizens that you select. So, you know, you would select citizens that would become part-time politicians. So this would maybe be problematic for recruitment. So, I mean, the enthusiasm wasn't really strong, although there were some people who were very strongly pushing for this model. And so on the second day, we started from scratch again. And I remember that Claudia Schwalitz was one of the first people saying like, okay, what works? What do we know from Canada, for example, Australia, is the mini public. Yes, if we're designing something from scratch, maybe we should start by basing it on some elements we know that work, that's, you know, that have proven their value. And so we started to redesign it with the mini public as kind of the central element of the model. So the idea became to not be fixed on mimicking the representative model. I remember somewhere in the discussion this felt as a kind of liberation, that very often when we think about fixing or a sort of institutionalized deliberative model, we actually take as a framework the existing representative parliament. And so the idea was, why not have many mini publics as being the institutionalized form? And then we came immediately with, okay, the two problems you have when you run several mini publics is agenda setting and control. So who is going to set the agenda for the mini publics? And who is going to do the follow-up and the control of what government or parliament does with? And this is where the idea of the citizen council came in, where you have a group of people who do not decide on something. So you split setting the agenda and deciding on those topics. And so that's where we designed a fixed citizen council of 24 people who once a year set the agendas for the mini publics that will be held. Up to 3. The 3 is just a budgetary thing, right? It could have been 4, it could have been 5, but we had to make a budget for a very small, it's a very small region. So the budgetary restraints were very, it's a smaller budget than, you know, Toronto has a multiple budget of what the region has, right? So we really had to design something. So you have up to 3 mini publics a year, so citizens' assemblies. But you have a citizen council setting the agenda for those. Then the follow-up is also located in that citizen council, yes? They will meet with the ombudsman of the parliament and the head clerk of the parliament on a monthly basis to follow up what happened with previous mini publics, with previous citizens' assemblies, yes? So what has been done with the recommendations? Where do we stand on, for example, the mini public we held a year ago on, let's say, agriculture? And so there is a constant, this is also in the decree, this is not seen as a kind of pit bull, it's a positive relationship, yes? It's really seen as a positive liaison where there is an interaction between the parliament and the citizens' council, okay? Moreover, when setting the agenda, the citizen council can also decide to some extent the budget, the length, and the number of people participating in a specific citizen assembly. So for example, the number of participants is between 25 and 50. So a citizen council can decide that a certain topic is very technical, not polarizing, and so you can do it with 25 citizens, yes? But they could decide that a certain topic, is more sensitive, more polarizing, or even needs a broader legitimate, and that you need 50 people to carry this through. Yes? The limit, again, the 25 is really something we discussed, the lower limit. Yes. The upper limit is again a budgetary limit. Yes. So to stay within a certain budget range, 50 was kind of the maximum. Because these people will be paid, so you have to take that into account when budgeting. Then the third element in the model is the permanent secretariat. This is the organizational administrative follow-up. So you need at least one person, and I can probably see Mass LBP thinking at least one person, but you need at least one person who follows this up, prepares citizens' assemblies, looks for the experts. This person will every time propose the preparation of a citizens' assembly to the citizen council. So they also have a kind of oversight in which experts are chosen, are there enough experts, etc. But so all this work has been done by permanent secretariat. This person has been hired last weekend. So yes, so the open people are Germanophones in that sense. They really are following this up. So as soon as the decree was voted, they immediately prepared hiring this person. David van Rijbroek was part of the jury. So I don't know who it is. Yes, so the person still has to be notified. So until then, it's classified. So I don't even know if it's a man or a woman, but I know the person has been decided upon. So this part is already done. And so now we're preparing up to September. So a number of things we still have on the agenda between here and September is we need to inform the public in the Ostbelgien region itself. We've had a lot of international press on this. Yes, The Economist, El País, but this is worthless if the people in Ostbelgien themselves are not fully aware of this process and are not supporting it enough to really make it work. So we're preparing some media campaign within Ostbelgien itself. We're also going to do a number of town halls. I think we'll do 4 or 5 where we really go to different places in the region, doing Q&As, trying to meet also a few stakeholders and getting some questions out of the way that might exist. We need to prepare the sortition between here and September. So all these things need to be taken care of. We might, if you have some questions on that, we might go into that more in detail. So this is about where we stand at the moment. So the decree has been voted unanimously, and now it needs to be done. That's basically a bit where we stand. So Patrick was there for the vote, so he has it all on tape. So any questions?
Oh, before we go into questions, I just wanted to ask if Tin had anything to add, excuse me, from his perspective.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
Okay, great. So just a few words because I've got a really bad cold, and unfortunately I'm going to leave you, but I'm joined here by my colleagues Alba and Laura. I'm literally going straight to bed after this. The one comment I would make is basically, you know, from a funder perspective, which is what I was asked to reflect upon. The initial starting point was quite challenging, right? It was actually, we were at a point where G1000 had done something, you know, the bigger G1000 gathering in 2000, what was it, these 11 or 12 a while ago, and there were these group of pretty known people, but you know, doing other things. And it was unclear to me, you know, as what is the organization there. And we kind of went in with a small grant. This is actually even before Yves was engaged initially to support the process through which G1000 is thinking about its renewed engagement. And this is something that, you know, would not be standard practice. You support an organization to think about what it's going to do, right? And we thought initially it would be going more in the direction of consolidating G1000 as an organization, maybe doing repeat citizens assemblies, even maybe registering an organization and sort of developing professional capacity. And then somewhere along the road came up this opportunity, and they were asking, okay, can we redirect the funding, or the vast majority of the funding, to this initiative? There's other parts of it. It's not just about institutionalizing the citizen assembly in the way that Yves described in Eupen. There's also the summer school part that I don't know, but there's other parts to the proposal. But that was a change, and in a way, it actually fitted extremely well our theory of change, because the idea when we were conceptualizing the portfolio is that we look at localities where there would be new forms of citizens' participation taking place, that we see whether and how this could transform institutions, that it's not just this one, you know, citizen participation around policy, et cetera, so how it's institutionalized. And also the idea is how to scale up. That was, I mean, scaling up now in this case, we could say it's a region, although the region is you know, smaller than some neighborhoods in Barcelona and in most cities, but it does have some competencies. So we were kind of putting it in that perspective, and in order to make the case for why to provide the support to G1000 for this specific experience. When I had the confidence that this would go well, I was totally impressed, and I'm very sad not to have been in the Eupen meeting in July last year, when there was this creative exchange between different thinkers and practitioners on the issue. But after I heard the news back from that, I was like, wow, this is not only going to happen, but it's going to be like putting in place a modern version of what used to be in Athens. I mean, I'm exaggerating maybe a little bit, but let's see how it works out. Of course, now with including without excluding women and migrants, as was the case previously. So I think it's a very interesting experience. Our role now is to see, I think, not only how, you know, to continue to support G1000 in this, but also how to bring this experience in other places. So one thing we're trying to do is Yves will speak at this session of the German foundations, where, you know, the idea is if you show this successful experiment, there is interest, as you know, from Freiburg, maybe some other German regions who could get interested, seeing that, you know, it is now institutionalized, that there is a person that is hired by the authorities, and that hopefully, you know, in the future other things will be rolling out, so that this could potentially interest some German foundations and maybe spread to even some regions in Germany, where then the regions become relevant, probably in a political, more relevant slightly in a political sense as well. Thanks.
I have a question.
Thank you.
If I can. The first presentation started with, we got this request from the elected officials. I want to know, how did that come about? What do we know about, was it just their positive public relations from the G1000 trial several years previously? Had it made its way into the popular awareness? Because obviously in a place like the United States, we would never get a request like this. So what led to the government officials saying, yeah, let's look at this? You need to unmute.
I'll take a few questions or just one by one. David, your DM.
I'd say go one by one.
Okay, so there's not one specific reason. Of course, I mean the G1000 is great. Everybody loves us, but that wasn't sufficient. It's one of the, I think one of the elements that played is they saw it in action. They did their own mini public on childcare the summer before, and I think the best thing to convince politicians of these kinds of processes, if they're done well, is that they observe one. So when I went, before we had the July meeting, which been also referenced, I went together with a local guy from the G1000, Christoph Niesen, who is a Germanophone, to meet all these politicians. And I think all mentioned this mini public they did as one of their inspirations. So just seeing it happen really strengthens the idea. So most of them were like, oh, these citizens took it really, you should have seen it. These citizens took this so serious. They were almost surprised to see that citizens could do what they could do. A second element is, so this is a very small region, so they take a lot of inspiration from other regions. Also for their social policy, they do trips to other regions they have connections with to kind of steal policy from other regions. They don't have very big cabinets, very big administration. This is what Tin said. It's a region smaller than some suburbs of Brussels or Barcelona. So, you know, but they still have to make government policy on healthcare, education. So they do a lot of trips trying to steal from other regions good ideas. And so they went, amongst others, to Germany. They went to Freiburg, but also to Vorarlberg in Austria, I think. And they saw some forms of citizen participation, deliberation in action. So I think that's the second one that they mentioned when we did the round trip as an inspiration, seeing it happen at other places. And then third is the Book of David against elections. I know for sure the minister president read it and got inspired by it because he mentioned this in our first meeting. So I think it's a bit, it's not just one thing, but I think for them, seeing it work themselves, seeing that it exists in other places, that it's not like a solitary, strange thing you do yourself. Other places are also working with this, and kind of reading a sort of theoretical underpinning of it, coming from David and with the G1000 as an inspiration. It's kind of a three-pronged inspiration, I think, that made this perfect storm. And then finally, I think once you get the idea in, and you start on it, for a politician, it's very hard to make a case against a citizen. So I think this made the unanimous vote in the end. Once this ball is rolling and it comes to a kind of a proposal, probably in the United States, you're right, there might still be something, and in many countries, but still it's very hard to suddenly say, no, we don't want to give the citizen more power, or we don't trust the citizen, or so I think not all were such super enthusiasts. We know for sure that 2 weeks before the vote, 2 parties were still doubting. And one was actually going to vote against. Yes? So I think they kind of turned the boat, seeing in the last week leading up to the vote that they were contacted by media. Yes, national newspapers contacting them. This vote is coming up. What is your position? And I think being in the media, oh, we're the only party that's going to vote against this, I think made it very hard. So I think long story to answer this.
Can I ask a question, Yves?
Please.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know, I know that you said that you're at the kind of beginning part of thinking through the sortition model that you're going to be using for September. I'm wondering if you can just talk to us a little bit more about how you're thinking about, recruiting people. Like how are you going to get your pool of candidates? How are you picking people? Like just what are your, like, where are you guys at on that? I'm curious.
Well, recruitment, I actually mailed you guys about this, I think, is...
Yeah, you probably didn't make it into my inbox, sorry.
No, we're going to use the method that Madrid is using, and it's the mass LBP.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you're gonna do direct mail.
Well, we're going to do yes. So the good thing here is we won't have to go through some private public opinion.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because it's a decree, they will ask the commune, the cities will have to hand their registers. So they will be able to compile the register of all the inhabitants. Because this is an interesting detail. They decided that it's the inhabitants that can be a member of this, not only the citizens, which means
great.
If Patrick goes and lives in Eupen, I think after a year he will be officially registered as an inhabitant, and he could be part of the sortition. Yes.
Okay.
So, but the registers will be given by the cities, and so they will compile a register of inhabitants. I think they will use 3 registers to have everybody, and then a first mailing with letters. Then, well, I don't have to explain to somebody by now.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. Then I was just curious to know. I guess you spoke with Chris. You must have.
They set 4 criteria, which is gender, then some form of SES, right? Income, education. This is the one we don't have in the register, so we will have to ask in the letter.
Okay.
And then one of the things that they pointed out is there is a difference, although it's a small region, there's a difference between North and South. Yeah. So South Ostbelgien is completely different than North Ostbelgien. I took their word on it, but it's in the decree, so it needs to be balanced by
North-South.
Completely different people, apparently. So, and finally, they also said that additional criteria can be set forward by the Citizen Council if a certain topic would require, for example, what you guys had when you did this renting.
Yep.
So you need some people from a certain criterion if it's a specific topic. But that's an empty provision that can be filled in by the Citizen Council, but will need to be justified, of course. Okay.
Thank you.
Does that kind of answer your...
Yeah, that does. That's great. Thank you. I was just really curious to know, and sorry that the information hadn't made its way to me already.
No.
Terry.
Yeah, so following up that, at this stage, there's no one who would be suspicious probably that the books have been cooked about who was selected. You just say we did it randomly and they believe you. Ultimately, obviously, we're going to need a transparent, it's not just the computer ran the numbers and here they are. You need something that is akin to the claritarian, something so everybody knows that it was done honestly and it was not secretly handpicked by some government official. Is that something which you're not really worrying about yet, or are you already thinking about transparency for the sortition collection?
I remember this being a brief discussion with Marcin, for example. Marcin does it with a dice, right? In Gdansk. And I remember this coming up at some point. To be honest, the procedure still has to be set. I think this is only relevant for the second draw, right? Sending your letters out. I think Madrid uses our software, which is an open source software, and they just did the public draw in. I saw the live broadcast. They did it. Yeah, nobody from Madrid is there. In the previous call, Iago was sitting on my screen where Adam is. That's why I was pointing. So with an open source software, of course, what you can't have is, and I guess it's in every country, you can't use the names, right? The right to privacy. So it will be a register number that you pull, but you can't use the full information of people. So to some extent, I think in the German-speaking region, it's also, I don't see it immediately as an issue. It's a very small region. Politicians are half-time politicians, so they still have a day job. So I think kind of trust in institutions in this region is not really a problem like you would have it, I would maybe say, at a national level or in Brussels, or where you have people more distant going like, okay, I don't know how Laurie's experience is in a city like Toronto with that. I mean, you run it in a million, so maybe you can answer this better than me.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one of the things is that the government never is in charge of actually selecting anybody. So we always hold the information, and there's just never a connection. So the way that we work here is that we'll receive a list of basically, we commission our postal service to select addresses randomly. So the client is divorced from that. We don't even have a say over the selection of addresses. We just determine the geography. Like we set the boundary limits around what we need, and we have a total set number that we give them. And then those letters are mailed out, and we don't even actually get to see those addresses before the letters have been mailed out. So we have like zero control ourselves in-house about that, and the client, which is a government or their agency, also doesn't have the ability to see that. And as Yves was saying, we don't know the names of people basically until like we pull them. We use a number identification, and we create basically profiles based on like their geography or their gender or their age cohort, but we don't identify them as individuals until they've been kind of run through the computer system and randomly selected. And then essentially we parse the data together and identify the people and then select them. And that's when we get to know them as individuals, not as kind of like data points essentially that have been randomly selected by first our postal service and then our computer system.
Mm-hmm. So maybe as a final thing, they actually in like the prep work, they have an Excel what still needs to be done until September. They have a tender out for somebody doing the technical part of this, but the decree, also the GDPR regulation in Europe, they can't hand over the names anyway. So to be honest, I've done a lot of statistics. I could probably do it for them. I have a meeting with them in 2 weeks, and this is the kind of technical stuff we'll need to address. So I can do the coding. I've done stuff like that. Surveys where we had longitudinal surveys where you couldn't link, where you had numbers connecting, two surveys without knowing the name, stuff like that. So there's techniques for that. We just need to make sure that it follows the regulation and the laws But the trust issue, I don't see really as an issue. Actually, I don't know, Laura, if you can say something about, do you feel people distrust this system or?
No, we've never had an issue, and we've even made mistakes, to be honest, in terms of data entry kind of being put in. And so like we don't allow politicians or anybody who's an elected representative to participate. And it has on, a handful of occasions, the data has been entered wrong and we've accidentally polled a politician, and then we've had to kind of rescind the offer. And usually people are actually surprisingly understanding, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I guess that really makes sense. This is really a citizens body. So even there, I think that Yves, you're right in pointing out that if there is a baseline level of trust in the institutions and in the concept, and if they understand kind of what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, we haven't found that we've really encountered any issues on the kind of legitimacy of the process that we run.
If I can even add to that, the list in the decree, I'm translating the decree, but I'm not a Germanophone myself, so I'm kind of going paragraph by paragraph every few days when I really feel courageous but what I did do already is the article where who cannot be part of it, and actually the list is much longer. So it's really commissioners, and they even, again there, they put in a kind of, let's say, blanket statement that the Citizen Council can decide that a person that is polled has a too big stake in the issue at hand and can still be rescinded from being in a citizens' assembly, but the decree says it must then be justified. And the presidency of the parliament, which is all the parties, so it's the Bureau of the Parliament, will have to then kind of rubber stamp this to agree. So it's kind of, so, I mean, it cannot prevent that it might happen, but kind of the provisions in there to kind of who cannot be part of it that could be suspicious for other citizens is a very long list. And even there is still a blanket statement that they might have missed somebody in there. Let's say you do something about home ownership and you pull a guy that owns 80% of the houses in Eupen, they might still decide, okay, that person is to, you know, so I don't know if that answers the question, but.
I do have more questions about that, but I'll wait and see if people want to take the conversation in a different direction.
Or we do a one-on-one someday if you have like a whole. Adam.
Well, I have a question actually for Björn and Sylvia. Björn, you're working with government people right now in Copenhagen. Sylvia, you're starting to talk with government people in Fortaleza. Do you have any thoughts about how you might adapt something like this in the cities where you're working, or whether it would be practical at all, etc.?
In Copenhagen, I think it's mostly a question of inspiration and seeing that this is one of several models that are out there in which decision makers actually let go of decision power. At this stage of their development, I'm not sure if they are up for such a concrete model. They're still finding their feet. Mm-hmm. But just to have this as an example is valuable because it pushes them to, you know, reconsider their own position on this and consider whether or not they are ambitious enough. Mm-hmm. So that's where the value is in to us locally in such dialogues, definitely.
For us, it's of course all this experience is inspiring, and it's useful to discuss the possibilities here with mayors. Although I think that this complete model and with a fixed citizen council, it's very ambitious. I think we are in a step behind that. We are enabling mini publics. So but this is very useful to show that politicians are willing because they think this is useful for them, and they are gonna do it and they're gonna pay for it. So it's great that we show mini publics as a public solution for public problems in regions and in different level, more local levels, because we were working mainly with local level. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about doing a mini public in Fortaleza, which is a major capital in the Northeast here in Brazil. And we were talking about sortition, and they have all kinds of doubts. But it's funny because the most relevant concerns that we have found here about sortition is from activists and movements, and that work a lot with mobilization, because they are really kind of, but then we have to tell them that this is a complementary way of doing politics and political action. That's not the one. And from politicians, this is not a problem. But we really think that when we start doing that in the city level with publicizing these initiatives, we will have a trust problem here, because here there are people who don't trust exit polls, who don't trust electoral polls, and I have worked in this industry, and I know that we have a lot of, so we will have to think very well about huge publicizing ways of doing sortition, and I was going to ask about how is your experiences, Laurie and everybody, about how the citizens, the selected citizens, feel along this long-term process? Are they arrested by people? Are they, I don't know, how is there any problem for them by being part of these bodies? That's a question.
Do you want, Yves, do you want me to answer first?
Yeah, and it was directed at you, so.
Okay. Yeah, so I can let you know how we've worked with this in the past. So Sylvia, though, to answer your question, citizens don't tend to get a lot of most people don't know who the citizens are on the reference panel until usually close to the end, if not at the end of the reference panel. This has changed slightly with our standing panels. So with our typical reference panels, which we would run anywhere from 4 to 5 different Saturdays, because they're in a contained period of time, our typical media strategy is not to profile the specific individuals until the end. And so that allows them to basically focus on the issue at hand without necessarily getting, pinged on Facebook or in social media or harassed or anything like that, if we're working with a contentious policy issue. This is a little bit different when we do a standing panel, which typically meets for 2 years, in which case the identities of the people do tend to be made known, usually after 4 sessions. So usually after the introduction part is done and they've been kind of introduced to the content matter, and then are kind of, sitting as kind of like citizen jury members, basically. We have had one instance where there was an article written and it created a lot of, it was a woman who was Muslim who wore a headscarf, and she was interviewed by a leading newspaper here, and the comment page on the section went very, very south very quickly. But what was really great to see was that the newspaper and everyone ended up standing up and defending this person, and really working to make sure that her presence on the panel was seen as legitimate. And they even did a piece on her after it was all over to talk to her about that experience, which was really interesting. That's the only time that we've ever had anything like that happen in the 10 years that we've been doing this, though. And it is something that I think could potentially be a risk all the time, and that you don't really know what people are going to say now that the internet kind of can do its own thing, and people, especially in comment sections, tend to be meaner than nicer. But usually if it's a contained period, we usually try and ask that the media only participate and share names at the end of the process to essentially avoid any of this happening, and it's skewing essentially the outcome of the citizen assembly.
I think Adam's been there for a while.
Sorry, Patrick. Or did you want to respond to something directly?
Yeah, it was specifically related to what Laurie was just saying there at the end, if that's okay, Adam, dear Adam. It was just with the Irish Citizens Assembly, from a media point of view directly, they did their work through into April 2017, and they only were available to news media to talk about what they'd been tackling, which was abortion and the 8th Amendment, on the next weekend that they were gathered together. So that was July. So I think that was very wise for all sorts of reasons, because I think what they were digging through was, first of all, it was very controversial, very difficult for them to process on a personal level and within the context of their work. And I think to have the confusion, which for most of them was entirely alien, of dealing with media at the same time as dealing with the subject in an environment which they weren't normally in anyway, would have been way, way too much to handle. So I think it was a very sensible approach that the Irish took.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of throw into this conversation that obviously trust in institutions is a big part of this. what we're talking about how public is the lottery process and the like. But I think that the flip side of that is also kind of like, what direct authority would these randomly selected citizens have? And I know that from the conversations that I've had in the US with a lot of strangers about some of these possibilities, I find that when you start talking about like an actual, say, legislative body that has legislative powers, that their minds, I've had people say that they would like to participate, but they wouldn't, because they wouldn't want to see their husband's past kind of dug up in the media, or like, you know, these types of things. So if a randomly selected citizen has some direct decision-making power in a group, there might be more concern about harassment and outside pressure and that type of a thing, versus if it's seen as just like a consultative body that is kind of weighing in on things. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with the elected official, and they get a lot of the comments and stuff. I think similarly, the biggest question I've ever heard talking with people about the idea of like a legislative body that has actual powers being selected by lot is are there going to be qualifications to be in the pool? And so those lead to kind of like two questions from us for Yves, which is what happens, like, is there any recourse, or, you know, like the Citizens Council follows up with the elected officials, it sounds like, to see where things are at. But let's, you know, hypothetically, they get stonewalled and placated and none of the recommendations ever get put into place. Is there some kind of recourse, or is it at the end of the day like legally kind of consultative? And then the other question I have is, are there any kind of qualifications to be in the pool?
Okay, for the last one, no qualification that does not exist to be an elected politician. So I was actually, it's funny, I was actually giving a guest lecture at a university yesterday in Brussels with students, and then I gave the example of South Australia, nuclear, storage of nuclear waste. And also one of the students was a bit like, but what do these citizens know about this, you know? And then I asked him, like, what degree do most MPs have? What is like the highest rate of, it's lawyers. I said, what do they know about nuclear energy? Nothing, they're not engineers, they have, so why would a citizen know less technical? And then you start thinking, yeah, it's true, they're all lawyers. What do they know about heart surgery, healthcare? And so this kind of, so of course, I mean, probably you can always think of a lower, of a threshold amongst which you might, Laurie might have some experience with that. You might pull the odd citizen where you're really like, this is really like below some threshold of comprehension of, but I mean, that seems like a very limited case. Okay.
Oh, and I don't like, I agree. I've just been very keenly aware as somebody who doesn't want to see a lot of exclusion, that when the conversation goes like from what it seems like from like a consultative body to like, these are going to be our representatives making our decisions, I find a lot of people start to wonder like, okay, but are they qualified? And so it's just a public perception thing that I've seen is out there. So tied to that question of like direct decision-making authority, or, you know?
Yeah, there's no perfect part of this. I think I remember a good anecdote by Marcin, which also gets people nodding when I explain it to them, is that what you get when you have several mini publics looking at several policy issues is you have a group of people who can spend their entire energy on one topic. Whereas MPs have to look at every topic that flies in the face of the agenda. Yes. So on day one, they might look at nuclear policy, day two, agriculture, day three on healthcare. And Marcin said that one of the people in the cities they were working with told him, I'm actually jealous of those citizens because I hardly ever have time, that much time to waste on one dossier, right? They had several weekends to look at this thing. I have to decide it in a few hours. I get a briefing by the cabinet, and probably in my country, which is much party led, it will be probably the study center of the party will tell you, this is our position on this. you go in and you tap, so actually these citizens get time to look at one specific problem over time, like look at the abortion issue. Of course, every party has this one specialist who is really into it, but most MPs in Ireland also have the same kind of run-of-the-mill view that you would have in a citizen. And these 99 citizens heard, I think, 40 experts. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong. 40 experts, read all the, it's something like that. So in some cases, they're better informed than your politician on some topics. So then for the direct authority, no. I mean, first of all, the Constitution does not allow it in this country. So Parliament cannot be bound by another body, not even by a referendum, right? So we went as far as you can with the Constitution. So part of not picking a fixed chamber has to do with some of the things that have been discussed. The media thing, right? Our fixed citizens will set the topic but not decide on them, and then do a bit of, let's say, more bureaucratic, boring follow-up of what others have decided so they're not even following Parliament for things they decided themselves. So that pressure thing, I don't think will apply very much to our fixed citizens. Again, might happen, but and then what you do have is politicians can still say no, yes, but they can also say it in the Gdansk case. I don't think I know any system where they can't. But they will have to justify. So the decree says they will have to justify in writing. So I don't see the Citizen Council as a place that that kind of puts pressure. So media and pressure groups will still be the watchdogs of politics. But the Citizen Council will be guardian of the procedure, which means that if Parliament or government says no, even though a citizens' assembly voted 90% or even with consensus over something, they will have to justify this, right? And the Citizen Council will have to check that the justification is, not just we didn't feel like it or we had a bad day, right? It will need to be something mentioning the budget, or we couldn't find a political consensus because party A. And then politicians will have to defend this towards public opinion, but this is the role of public opinion. What I always say to people about this is the point where politics becomes a bit boring, yes? Some things like, the abortion case are taken out of this spectacular political debate. Yes, if you look at a citizens' assembly, it's very, very, very often very boring. Patrick will challenge me on this because he's a filmmaker, yes? But I also say it's a procedure where politicians sometimes can say no, but they will have to prove why they are politicians and why they are so special. Yes? So this is the point where a politician says, okay, these citizens have listened to this for weeks, have read the information, heard the experts, but I still say no. Because, whereas now they do this all the time without having to justify this. Yes? Now, actually, very often they don't really justify the vote, or the party will justify it. Here, when they overrule citizens, they will have to justify it. I think it's a good procedure. And citizens, I think, will take a no if it's really well argued. If you can say, look, this would bankrupt the city, citizens will accept a no without any problem. But you will have to justify it. So, Adam, I don't know if that.
Oh yeah, and just to say, like, I think y'all have been incredibly clever, and this is a great way to go about it. I asked those questions about qualifications and decision-making authority, mostly to try to like make sense of if there's tons of trust and nobody seems to care about like how the random selection is done and that type of thing. And then when I'm talking with people here in the U.S. and there's so much distrust, is that a cultural thing? Is that because of the perception of like, oh, these are the decision makers? Like, what is the hesitancy that I might run into with when it comes to trust here? So that's all. Good on you.
If I can, though, I'd actually really like to second what Yves is saying about people also being quite reasonable if a decision that they've made a recommendation for can't come through and there's a really good reason given. This is something that we also have experienced a lot of, because it does happen that a recommendation will come through, and then an organization, you know, is running kind of like, you know, different consultation processes alongside, sometimes it's with experts as well, and then we'll bring the kind of recommendation to a body of, you know, legal or technical experts who just are like, I can, you know, honor the spirit of this recommendation, but the technical stuff, we cannot do it. It's just actually physically or financially impossible. And as long as you give the time of day to respond in a thoughtful way, most citizens actually really appreciate it, totally understand it. And I think because they were part of a process where they had to learn about an issue and deliberate on it, and then they get kind of a really thoughtful response, I think it actually serves to like enhance and build and make really serious inroads into further trust in governmental institutions as well. So Yves, I think it's a really great thing that you've built in that kind of follow-up kind of component and that body as part of it. I think it's actually going to really help to really foster a lot of trust between the citizens in the region and the government, and also kind of create and build like a really just robust relationship between the two pillars.
Maybe to just quickly give the formal side of it, in the decree it says that pretty quickly after the Citizens' Assembly is over, there is a meeting in the Commission of the Parliament where the government and the parties are present, and will kind of give this is what we think we'll do, and then after a year there will be a plenary session. So there's two formal moments. So
that's great.
There's more detail to that, but quick, I think Bjorn has a.
Yes.
Or you were waving.
Yes, I'm not leaving again, but I had to leave at the beginning, so I missed the whole presentation. So I'm just wondering. Do you have an updated version or description in English, or will there be another web meeting where we'll get the chance to hear it?
So I did one on Tuesday, so you missed that one. This is already my second one.
Okay.
It looks like someone's recording this.
Yes, I'm recording this. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's going to go into a shared folder. Hopefully, I'll get it right this time.
Or you can spend the weekend watching.
If not, David
Yes.
can tell you everything that Yves went through, so that Yves doesn't.
So I'm trying to translate the decree, but at the moment, to be honest, there's a lot of interest in this thing. I can almost every day accept a speaking invitation. Today, no. So yesterday at the university, Tuesday, Belgian diplomats, next Monday, Brussels business meeting, Tuesday, another university. So actually I have to, at some point I will have to stop accepting these things because I get no other work done at the moment.
Yves, I have just one question about, have you already predicted something about how to register the mini publics, and how to make this contents of the deliberation public, so it will qualify the public debate on the topics like political education and trying to make the mini publics a proxy for the general public about the things that are being deliberated. Is there already predicted in the decree or in the design, or you will think about that when the first mini public happens?
You mean how public it will be in a sense of visible or transparent, or?
No, more than transparent, the contents, like which kind of arguments, information the mini public took to get to the consensus, and what was the main reasons, and how this built during the deliberation, so that public opinion would be informed about this process. Something like the voters pamphlet in the Health, Democracy and Citizens Initiative Review, like how the general public can learn from the mini publics.
Well, I think there will be like in any citizens assembly, a complete transparency on which information they get, which experts they hear. What you don't want is, for example, people present at the table and at the deliberation, because it will, so that part normally is, then you ask your media or your cameras to step outside, because this will affect how people also deliberate. So, but all the rest of it will be transparent. The thing, what we need to do now before September is really get the media on board. Actually, for the moment, I'm more afraid of no media attention than too much media attention. So, for example, Ireland was a very visible national case, but I think I remember Matthew Taylor of the Royal Society of the Arts saying they did one on a parliamentary committee. It was the Citizens' Assembly in the UK. It was the first time. Patrick can maybe give the details of which that was. But anyway, I remember Matthew Taylor saying the most amazing thing of it is that the media didn't mention for a second that citizens were involved in drafting this, which was the first time it was done in a more advisory. So I'm more afraid that you will have a lack of media attention for this than too much media attention for this. So we have somebody new.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
Charles
yes.
Pache from Génération Nomination.
Yeah. I just noticed I mixed with the times again. I'm 1 hour late.
Okay.
Okay. It's fine. Hello.
Patrick.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was back in Belgium just the last few days, and I went over to see the German-speaking state broadcaster, BRF.
Yeah,
And they said sort of sheepishly that they hadn't really understood quite how significant what had happened in East Belgium was. I think that's pretty normal. I don't think that my sisters and brothers in the media really understand the difference between representative democracy and the sort of things that we are all interested and excited about. They just don't even realize that there's a difference. They don't even realize how fundamentally different the thinking happens if you elect people and have them in opposing political parties versus if you deliberate. And so it's just not even registered on most journalists' radars as of any significance at all. A few people are beginning to hear the word Citizens' Assembly, particularly in my native UK, even though I don't live there. Extinction Rebellion has definitely brought that to the fore. I think also Brexit has brought that to the fore because things are so conflictual and politicized, as it were. The Brits are talking politics much, much more than they have before, but with the word dysfunctional or something like that very often attached to politics. So for journalists, it's a really hard sell that you face wherever you are. Maybe not for LBP, where there's a familiarity with it, or in Australia where New Democracy has been working for so long. But elsewhere, journalists, like politicians, will probably be the last people to get the significance of citizens' assemblies. So it's really difficult. And I would answer Yves' other point about citizens' assemblies being boring. And in fact, funny enough, Graham Smith, who's also now a new member, but I think you all knew him anyway, he, a couple of years ago when I was talking about filming this, he said the same thing. And obviously, the specifics of the room are really boring. You know, people sitting at tables with a few Post-it notes and talking is very, very dull. It's death to journalism. But what underlies citizens' assemblies in terms of personal transformation and implication in political process is absolute gold dust. So it takes a different approach, and it takes a bit of thinking as a journalist to present that, but it's such good fun. I mean, the Irish film, I had to, it was real seat of the pants stuff. We did it at the last minute. only a short amount of time and everything. But the gold dust was the participants. If you can press their buttons to speak about the process, they just come alive. And so the room is very boring, but the process in its ensemble and what it means politically in terms of individual emancipation and engagement is just magnificent. But it takes a bit of thinking to capture it.
And if I can maybe add to that, and then is that this is the advantage of doing it in a very small region, is that if you do it 2 years, and almost in every family somebody will have done it, right? And so you will have kind of a one-on-one, like, no, I've been there, really, the best ambassadors of these processes are people who've been in there.
And specifically, actually, Yves, related to that, talking to the same BRF a few days ago, we've now got a letter of intent from them as a public broadcaster to screen our films, the Irish one, and even probably the Extinction Rebellion one that we were commissioned to do, but also next time, if we do get a budget to go and film it, to do news reports on foreign people coming to look at East Belgium in what they're doing, and for us as foreigners and media to sort of say, well, actually, this is spectacularly interesting. You may think that it's nothing much. It's just an iteration of what you've already been doing with your Burger Dialogue, the citizens' dialogues. But actually, it's fundamentally different. So there's a two-way education process that goes on, and it somehow needs to be done relatively softly rather than in a way which is, journalists are rubbish or politicians are rubbish, they don't get this. It's actually, this is really interesting, come and have a look. That's the approach.
Adam and Bjorn, I don't know.
Just piggybacking off of that, you talked about one of the main things you got to do by September is really get this out locally and have people understand it and grab a hold of it and get excited. And so I was just wondering, do y'all, I assume you have a communication strategy and not just kind of who to target or what news media to target, but also looking at kind of the framing of this that might work in that culture? Or
Well, to some extent, also with the vote, and we do this all the time together with Parliament. I mean, they remain owners of the process. So, for example, with the vote, in the lead up to the vote, the deal was, or they do the contacts with their media, and we do all the rest. So we did the national media, international media, whatever, but the local media, they have their own contacts. So, I mean, to this extent, it's also a bit of part of respect. They have their own press service. So we have a meeting tabled now to discuss all these things. Part of it is just a Q&A. Also, I think we should do a few town halls where we present it very briefly, and then rather than just as a kind of UFO coming from somewhere, the G1000 experts coming to tell you what we designed for you is also kind of, so I don't have a specific strategy for that. I do a lot of presentations. Sometimes you get the weirdest questions, and just show yourself very open to, this is also a good way of kind of doing your own little public opinion research, finding out sometimes you might find out that some of the things you didn't think of are the issues people are worried about. So that's for the moment, and I could make a German joke about your question of, tailoring it to that community, but because this is taped, because this is recording, I'm going to be diplomatically very. Björn, you had a question?
Yes, I agreed with myself that I could be allowed to ask you one question you've already answered, I'm sure, in the beginning. But where did it land in terms of who has the initiative to bring up a certain topic?
So that's the authority of the Fixed Citizen Council.
Yeah.
As the authority, and So it will have a special session in September. For the moment, I think this will be a one weekend session. It's going to be a learning model, right? Maybe we discovered this September that we don't have a lot of input and they can do it in an afternoon. And once the process gets known, also with organization and organizations, this is going a bit back to the question by Sylvia. You know, this is a place where stakeholders can also present their issues, right? Trying to get a thing on the agenda. So, but the Citizen Council has complete freedom to decide which topics they want to put forward.
Yeah.
This is a kind of trust, and this is something we propose. First of all, you don't want a beauty contest. So citizens will need to have at least 100 signatures to put something on the table, to be considered by the Citizen Council. But we stop tallying at 100. So it's kind of, you need to have this minimal threshold to avoid that every citizen proposes something, you know, we need new flower pots in my park, or, you know, to have a bit more substantial proposals. But if you would kind of continue to count the vote, then you almost bind the hand of the Citizen Council to go for topics that have the highest degrees. But then you get in a situation where the European Commission has public input on loads of very important dossiers, but the one that hit it was summertime, because suddenly German media, 4 million people participated in the public consultation of the European Commission on summertime, because German media suddenly jumped on this. And then you have the Common Agricultural Policy, which is 40% of the budget, and there a few hundred people participated in the out of 450 billion. So you want to avoid that, you know, you have a super important dossier making out, you know, education, but then like, oh, but most people voted for the discussion on whether the new flag of the region should be blue or red. So, so the public can enter these things. Politicians can enter proposals. The government can do, and parties can do. But it's up to the Citizen Council. So the Citizen Council can say we took 3 topics, and none of them come from politics.
Yeah.
Or the reverse. I would guess in the beginning it will be a mixture. Again, it's a learning model. It's open to change. This is what we started with, and
yeah,
really we had a blank page designing some of this stuff. So let's say you saw the list of people there in July. This is a bit the best practice we came up with, also from experience we knew of, but
yeah,
some of the stuff is not road tested yet. So it's.
I'm not sure what you call the method besides the Ostbelgien project or initiative, but it sounds to me like a kind of deliberative citizen initiative.
You mean the Citizen Council itself?
The whole process you're setting up, I mean, what immediately comes to mind, and what I think about is you could call it a deliberative citizen initiative, but I don't know if that would be a fitting term or not.
Possibly, yes. To be honest, in the region itself, all these things have German names, so
yeah.
So it's a Bürgerrat, and Citizen Council is a Bürgerrat.
Yeah.
I think for the literature we can then stamp English terms on this, but it's.
No, I'm not trying to put stamps. I was just trying to think for myself. You know, what would I call it if I was to explain it to someone else? Yeah.
Yes. I will have to leave also in a few. I'm in Antwerp and I need to get to Brussels. It's Friday evening, so like in 5 minutes I will have to also.
Yeah, Thank you for the, thank you. This has been really useful. And before we go, I also want to make sure that everyone here has actually met Terry Boricius. Terry, are you still there? Oh, I'm not sure he's there, but he wasn't in Athens, but he's one of the newest members of Democracy R&D, as is Patrick. His ideas about using multiple randomly selected bodies with different functions were influential on this project and also on the one in Madrid. I meant to introduce him earlier because I think just everybody else was in Paris and has already met. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Yves, for presenting. I am very excited about this ongoing reform.
And just to mention for Charlie, who this is recorded. David mentioned this before you came on, so like you can watch it afterwards if you want. Like
great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
My pleasure, and thank you for all the questions.
Thank you. Good work, Yves.
I'll watch it again.
Next month, well, actually, in a few weeks, there will be, on the 20th, I think, is the first call about the Citizen Initiative Review, and I'm trying to arrange another one that fits for Australia and Japan. In next month will be the two Toronto standing panels. So Laurie's colleagues, Caitlin and Alex, will be talking about the ongoing mini-publics in Toronto. Hopefully after that in July, Adam and Raul will be talking about the randomly selected student governments in Cochabamba, Bolivia. All right. Have a good day or evening, everyone.
Thanks, David, for arranging.